Welcome to the EsOp Minicast. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Bret Keisling, and as it says on my business cards, I'm a passionate advocate for employee ownership. This Tuesday on our primary EO EsOp podcast, we have a deep dive conversation with Gina Schaefer, who is the founder, chair of the board, and retired CEO of A Few Cool Hardware Stores, which became a partial ESOP in 2021. Most of the podcast naturally is about business and employee ownership, but we do discuss Gina's book, Recovery Hardware, that I find so inspiring that I wanted to share her description with you in today's minicast. Here's Gina Schaefer discussing Recovery Hardware. Gina, you are an author, and your book ties in various themes of what is important in your life, from the business to other things, but recovery hardware is the topic of the book. We will include a link to where you can get the book in the show notes, and we'll have some other information about Gina as well. But tell me about recovery hardware.
So in 2014, one of my teammates, whose name is Mark, not my husband Mark, came to me and said the community where our store was had nicknamed us Recovery Hardware. And that was significant because so many of our teammates had come from a local recovery clinic called the Whitman Walker Addiction Services Program that was right down the street from our store. And when we opened that first location, there were a couple of things that we decided that we were not going to put any obstacles in front of employment, which was a pretty radical thought at the time. So here's a really strong example. At the time, it was still legal to have the felony box on the application. Whether you want to call me naive or stupid or short-sighted, or I've been called all of them, I thought that the felony box was a rude question. I distinctly remember thinking, this is rude, I'm not going to ask it. And I think a little bit of it was, I thought it was being nosy, honestly.
That's very funny.
So we banned the box before we legally were required to ban the box. My very first teammate had been in prison for 17 years. And I didn't know that when I hired him. He didn't feel like he needed to tell me that. And then we got to know each other, and he felt comfortable telling me that. And then he became part of our story. And he worked with us for almost 11 years. And had I asked him that question, I'd like to think I would have hired him anyway, but a lot of people wouldn't have. His application would have immediately gone in the trash. The second person who came to interview was 6 weeks clean from a crystal meth addiction. And anybody who's dealt with any kind of addiction knows that you are only what your next day gets you. And so it didn't matter really if it was 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years. I mean, obviously. And he told me that. And I remember thinking, wow, that seems so honest. I'm so happy that this guy told me this. And I also said, I don't care. I don't care. And his story's more involved in that because I didn't hire him at first and then I did. But we are to this day friends. He's been clean for 21 years. He left, but when he left working with us, he started telling everybody else in the recovery rooms to go see that lady at the hardware store. And so he sent Skippy, who sent Brian, who sent another guy named Mark, and before we knew it, people were joking about having AA meetings in the plumbing aisle because we just had this wonderful community of people who, oh, by the way, also happened to be going to recovery meetings down the street. So to get back to your original question, my coworker, Mark, came to me and said, this is what the community is calling us. I sobbed because I thought it was such a beautiful nickname. People had been asking me for years to write a book about starting a hardware business, which I just frankly didn't think was an interesting enough topic for a book. And the second he said that, I said, that's not only the name, but I'm going to tell the stories of how we've done this to hopefully inspire other businesses to do something similar. And so that's how it started. I started writing it I wrote the first draft in 2020, January 2020. And published in September of 23, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was 22. And I've been talking about it ever since.
Well, first of all, it speaks to how you may be an overachiever because a number of people started writing during COVID. You got the book finished before COVID.
I started writing in 2020. So I started writing right before COVID hit, not knowing it was coming. And then I finished it. Yeah. It actually, just to tie the EO bow on it, when I started writing it, we hadn't decided that we were going to form the ESOP. And so that was never part of the original manuscript. And then when it was getting closer and closer to publishing time, we had decided to form the ESOP. And it was a beautiful way to say, this is where we started and this is how we're going to end. And end is not right because we're not ending, but Yes.
It's funny when you said end, I was going so completely opposite of, oh my goodness, this is a great excuse to have an additional reprint, in a year or two, an updated version of how it's going now. Gina, what you're doing, and I would like to ask a couple of questions about it. What you're doing is so important, and to share with, doesn't come up a whole lot in the podcast, but my recovery date is Memorial Day 1990.
Right on.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Awesome.
As you and I chat a little bit, it'd be dying. Why did I quit drinking? I had to. With that, we'll wrap up this episode of the minicast. Please visit the show notes for this episode for a link to Gina's website and her book, including a link for bookshop.org, which is a platform designed to support independent bookstores, a cause which is very important to Gina. Join us this Tuesday on our primary EsOp podcast for my full conversation with Gina Schaefer. Thank you so much for listening. This is Bret Keisling. Be well.
We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook at EO Podcast Network and on Twitter at EsOp Podcast. This podcast has been produced by Bret Keisling for the EO Podcast Network. Original music composed by Max Keisling and marketing by Bitsy Plus Design. And I'm Bitsy McCann.